Leadership is about influence. It's not about control. Control is brittle. As soon as your title's taken away, you lose it, right? For me, I didn't even have a title. I just had people that were willing to follow me.
Welcome to the Learn It All podcast, the show for today's leaders who want to get ahead and stay ahead because we believe great leaders aren't born or made. We are always in the making. I'm your host, Damon Lemby, two-time best-selling author and CEO of Learn It, a live learning platform that has helped upskill over 2 million people. In just a moment, I'll be joined by Aaron Vaccaro. He's the president of Singularity University and one of the key players behind Topgolf's explosive rise. At just 33, he's led turnarounds, scaled billion-dollar visions, and built cultures that actually live their values. Coming up, Aaron's going to break down for us why outcome over ego is the mindset that separates great leaders from just the good ones, how to navigate imposter syndrome, why it's so important to be the one who's always willing to show up, and how you can create a culture where it's still cool to care. So Aaron, you've been through scaling chaos and crisis turnarounds. What have those moments really taught you about what's the difference between great leaders and those who just don't make it?
That's a good question. Well, I think scaling chaos and crisis turnarounds probably teach you different things about what great leaders look like. I think what they have in common is the ability to put outcome over ego. And so I think there's a lot of times where you've got to just have to dig deep and eat things you don't want to eat. And, set the ego aside when either you've got to, make tough decisions or realize that, you're trying to get to a particular outcome and you may have to sacrifice making your point sometimes. And so I think humility is a really important one that across the board. When we had the chaos of scaling Topgolf, I think chaos is a good word, but it was fairly organized. I mean, it's funny. It's like, at the time we were growing like a rocket ship, we were building 10 Topgolfs a year and they were pretty much, on the rails in terms of what it took to build. We had a great partner, a construction partner. We had a great financing partner, and we had a great team, development team at Topgolf that knew what they were doing. And so we were just cranking those things out, one after another. And at any given time, you've got 10 under construction in various phases. And so it was like kind of organized chaos. And then you had other things we were doing on the side that were building this vision of what the company was going to look like. So in addition to building these locations, we also were building a media company, Topgolf Media, that was going to do all the sort of brand and content marketing and started producing some original content and was building games for the venues as well as building a golf video game. And we also were buying up golf technology. And so we bought this, screen golf company that was it's like a golf simulator. And then we bought this camera technology, which you now see on TV called Top Tracer, which originally was Pro Tracer. And what, the reason I say all that is something I observed with Eric, who was the leader, was my partner and was the CEO of throughout this period. He had this vision of what this brand was going to be. And it was going to be this, sports entertainment company, not just a golf venue. And he had this very clear vision that he was dedicated to. And it wasn't always easy to get that through with the investors or the board or the employees, but he maintained this serious dedication to, this is where we're going. This is the vision. And I'm going to bring you all along with me, no matter how difficult it is. And there were times when, like, for example, buying this camera technology out of Sweden, he was so convinced, like, we have to have this technology because for the future of our company, we need to own all the technology in our tech stack. We need to own the cameras. We need to own everything. And we went to the board 20, 30 times with different versions of the deal to finally get it approved and get a merger, get an acquisition done. But he was relentless. And so I think the lesson there was when you have a vision as the CEO and you are totally set on that, this is where you need to go. Sometimes you just have to be absolutely relentless to get there. And even if people don't see the vision at first, your job is to help them see it and to not give up until you get where you're going.
And so you're referring to Eric Anderson, who is basically your mentor from where you started with West River, right?
Yep, 100%.
let me ask you this. So when Eric was passionate around having to own the full tech stack, what were you thinking? Were you in agreement with that, or did you think that maybe was overkill?
Oh man, it's a good question. I was probably like, I don't know, 25 years old at the time.
Yeah.
And I was just getting dragged around, by the scruff of my neck at that point. Like, I'll tell you, so when I joined out of school, I did a year of grad school, which was basically like trade school for finance, and immediately jumped in as his chief of staff, right? As he took over as CEO of Topgolf. And in my
how'd you meet him?
Luck. Just the grace of God being in the right place at the right time. I went to a college called Whitworth University in Spokane. Go Bucks. And he was on the board of a company in Spokane and was from there, and a board member that I knew introduced us. And it was funny. It was literally like, hey, I know this guy in Seattle. He's got this investment firm. I don't really know what he does. I just have a feeling you guys will get along well. Like, it was just a vibe thing. And could not have been more right. I mean, I started with him 2 weeks after I finished school, and it's the only job I've ever had. And my relationship with him is something I'm most proud of in my career, is that trust that we've built. And now we've done all these things together. It's been 11 years, and including building Topgolf and now all these other companies. So it was luck that we got together, but it's been hard work and investment in the relationship that we're still here. But there's been plenty of times where I thought he was nuts, right? I mean, I describe Eric as like, he's a creative visionary at heart who, learned finance at Goldman Sachs and engineering at Stanford. Like, he's extremely capable and brilliant and good at what he does, but he also is really just like a kind of crazy visionary deep down.
When you were chief of staff, were you comfortable enough to give him pushback?
It took years. I was like, I didn't know, what I had imposter syndrome for a long time. And I also had not just I guess imposter syndrome in that, one, I'm like, okay, what am I, like, I don't really know what I'm doing. Two, it was at any time he could get rid of me and hire some smarter kid from Stanford or somewhere. Like, cause I came from this little no-new school. I didn't go work on Wall Street. I was just like, picked the runt out of the litter. And I was so insecure about that for years until finally it was probably 3 years in, we had some conversation about, I said, like, I was really failing on something and I felt really bad about it. And I'm just like, I know you can let me go anytime and you can get some better kid from Harvard or something. And it's just like, what are you talking about? Like, why would I do that? Those kids are pricks. Like, you're way better and you're not brainwashed. I can teach you everything I want. And he's like, what are you talking about? I love you. Like, we're not going anywhere. And that was a huge turnaround moment for me to be like, oh, okay, there's like grace here. And like, he actually cares about me. And this is, he's not just going to toss me out of the first mistake that I make. And when I tell you, like, that actually lowered my blood pressure for like probably 20 points, that's not even a joke. It was like, I'm like an ex-college athlete, 25 years old, and I'm living with like 145/85 blood pressure. Like, this doesn't make any sense. So I think it was the combination of keeping a case of Chef Boyardee in my desk, and that living with that stress was making it pretty bad. But then once I figured out, I'm not like living on knife's edge all the time, and probably started having a salad once in a while, life got a lot better. But yeah, I thought he was crazy because he'd have these things of like, we're going to build this whole media company and we're going to buy this technology and do all these things. I'm like, all right. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about, but I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to help. And
how did you finally get it across? How did you, I know it was relentless, but how did you finally get the investors to buy in?
Basically, like, to sum it up, we had this company that made this technology. They were a group of engineers out of Sweden, and they were making some money. They were installing these things in golf courses and tracking the balls. And they had one TV deal in Europe. They were making maybe like 400,000 of profit, like 4 million of revenue, 400K of EBITDA. Not a big business, but they knew what they had. They had the patents on this technology. And so they were super tough negotiators, and they wanted like $100 million for the company. And so, of course, the board thought that was insane. There's no way we're going to pay that. It's stupid. And Eric's vision was, this is critical technology to the future of our company. It's worth, way more than you think it is, because it's not about the revenue, it's about the IP. And if this is going to be a $5 billion company, is it worth, 100 million out of 5 billion to make it, to own our future and secure that technology forever? And his point of view was, yeah, it was. The way that we finally got it to work, though, was I think the total deal ended up being something like $75 million, but it was structured in such a way that it was some upfront, it was some cash, it was a lot of stock, and then it was also milestoned out so that they only got, tranches of that 75 million if we successfully installed this technology in all these Topgolf venues and were able to actually roll it out. So it was, we did all this math in terms of looking at the cost savings. So for example, it cost $2 million per Topgolf to dig the holes and do the target system the way that we were doing it. And so the theory was we can use cameras instead and not have to dig the holes and not have to put in all these like target systems. And that was going to save us, $100,000 or a couple $100,000 or more per venue. And so if you do the math, it's going to save us millions of dollars on the technology. And then we can roll it out to driving ranges and we can monetize it that way. And so we had all these justifications of like how we're going to make the money back, and finally got to a point where it made enough sense that the board was like, okay, fine, we'll do it. Either that, or they were so tired of hearing about it and we were crushing it so much on the venue side that they were just like, fine, you can have the cameras. Like, just stop asking us.
I think one of the great points that you bring up right there is let's not be penny smart and pound foolish. Eric's vision was, look, if we're going to be a multi-billion-dollar organization and we're fighting over $100 million here, let's look at the long game and the big picture. And I love the idea of how here's some other ways how we're going to monetize it. But I want to go back. So that's great. But I want to go back to the lesson that you learned that from him with the imposter syndrome and everything about, hey, my job is relatively safe and it's okay to make mistakes. Because that is such a important one for our listeners out there who are leaders. Because Eric probably assumed that you felt that way the whole time, but you just didn't realize that, right? So how can you
communicate it?
Right? How can you help a leader who maybe has these high-performing top individuals who are probably busting their butts, but maybe they have that same insecurity that you had at the time?
Well, I think it actually starts with whether it's true or not, if that grace sort of exists, right? So, there are plenty of places where if you screw up, you'll get kicked out. I mean, those cultures still exist, and if you have lots of turnover and things, I'm not saying every boss is going to be like that. I was lucky in that I have a boss that had a long point. I had a long-term point of view, and he's also, super loyal, and he likes to build. He likes to build people up. He doesn't want to just trade them out. And so for me, it was just a question of like understanding that and making sure, like communicating about like how he saw our future together and how he was investing in me. And there's a parable or a story about the guy who makes a mistake in the factory, and it costs, manager costs $1 million. And then he goes in and he's like, screws this whole thing up, and he learns this terrible lesson, and then goes into the boss and says, all right, well, I assume you're letting me go, so I'll go ahead and pack up my things. And he's like, letting you go? Like, I just spent $1 million educating you. Like, I'm never letting you go.
Yeah,
bringing somebody else in to learn the same mistake and cost me another $1 million.
What's so funny about that from my own experience, when we overexpanded in late 1999, 2000 during the .com days, it was all my fault. I really pushed my father to do that. It cost us several $1 million. And he always would joke, he said, you got the most expensive real world MBA that anybody ever had to do, but it was worth it, kid, because I know that that investment will work out. And that's a great way to look at it.
As long as you take advantage of it and don't repeat the same mistakes.
And that's the whole thing. And that's something we're definitely going to get into, because it's totally fine to make mistakes, but it's the learning that goes with it, and just learn to make new mistakes. Now, I don't want to stay on Topgolf too long, because it's an incredible growth story. I have one last question about it. When it came to growth and scaling, what was one of the biggest challenge from a leadership perspective, especially around working with hiring and people and culture?
Culture was really important at Topgolf. So we put a lot of focus on that. We won a lot of awards actually for being best place to work, and we did these like Rockstar Awards for our teams, and we had a huge focus on that, which I think made a big difference. I'll tell you the system that they used, and I didn't come up with this. I inherited it. There's a guy named Neil Allen who came before me. He worked with Eric when he started in his 20s before I came along, and was kind of the original. He was me. And the way that Eric used to talk about him, I'd be like, man, if Eric talks about me someday, the way he talks about Neil, I'll have been successful. But he had this system that they called 51-49 when they hired people. So it was 51% culture and 49% skills. And so it was basically like if you had the 49%, it's necessary but not sufficient. So you couldn't, if you had the skills to do the job, but you didn't have the culture fit, it wasn't enough. Versus if you had the culture fit, but you didn't have all the skills, that was enough, because culture is 51%.
And I assume culture is also wrapped into, mindset and everything like that too, as far as what was required.
It's mindset, how you show up to work. We always said, we want people to bring their whole selves to work, and how you treat your colleagues, and how you follow our core values. We had our 5 core values, and we had something called behavioral norms, which is we signed up the way that we agreed to treat each other. It was like, I don't triangulate. I don't make fuzzy agreements. I show up on time. We had these things. And so it was fairly easy to say, okay, if we have a conflict of some sort between our team, or even at the most senior level, you could go to the paper and say, this is because somebody's not following one of our cultural norms. And when you took this job, you agreed this is what you're going to sign up for. And so let's look and say, okay, somebody is making a fuzzy agreement, or somebody is not being respectful, or you're not following one of our core values. And it sounds like it's something that everybody, like most companies, talk about and have core values. But I can tell you, being a number of different companies now, it actually looks and feels different to be at one where those are really in practice and taken seriously. I've been in other companies where they're on the wall, but you never talk about them and they don't mean anything. We really lived and breathed those core values at Topgolf. It was, caring and fun and edgy spirit, and everyone knew it. We had it actually printed out on everyone's desk.
What's another example? Because I'm with you. People have their core values, they're up on the wall, and even the leadership can't even recite them. What is another practical tip or exercise a leader can do to help his team learn how to remember and lead by those core values? Well,
you got to lead by example. I think that's obvious, but it really starts with the top, right? Like, it's got to start from the top. We'll talk about Singularity in a minute, but when I came into Singularity as the leader, that was probably the first and easiest thing to change, was actually the culture coming down from the top of the company. And some previous people on the leadership team or administrations had not always lived those values, and it really trickles down throughout the whole company. And so I think you have to lead by example. I think you have to not be embarrassed to actually talk about those values and use them, and say, look, we all agreed on these and we're going to use them. The other thing is, you don't always have this opportunity, but when you do have the chance, having the team be part of building and designing those so they actually have buy-in and ownership, I think makes a huge difference too. So we got to do an exercise where the team that we have now, at Singularity, we've got 20 people, has basically been the same 20 people now for 2.5 years almost, or 2 years. They got to kind of buy in and design those values. And so everyone has shared ownership in it. And it wasn't just something that I put on them.
That is critical. I wanted to just highlight that for our listeners, that when possible, and I'm not saying it has to be a democracy where everybody gets an even say in it, but if you open it up where people can at least contribute their ideas and share their thoughts, whether or not they're being implemented or not, they feel like they're part of something. And Aaron, as well as I do, especially, I mean, you're 33 now, a young age of 33, your generation really wants to have purpose and belonging and feel like they're part of a mission and something more than just, bottom line numbers. And I think that is the critical point that you touched on right there. And I brought up your age because I think you've been president of Singularity for 3 years now, right?
Yeah, getting close.
And so what was it? So you stepped in and there was obviously this leadership change that needed a team change that needed to be happening. How did that look? You were already aware of what was going on, but did you meet with the group individually and say, look, here's the direction we're going to go. You're on board or you're not, or did you just make the cuts? Now, I bring this up because I interviewed Doug Conant, who did 2 massive turnarounds at Nabisco and also Campbell's. And
yeah,
he went through something very similar, but obviously for 30,000 person organization. Yeah.
It was. I can't imagine going through that scale. In a way, it's different because you don't know every person. We've been involved in Singularity for a long time, so we invested. Coming from my investment firm, we invested in 2015, and then more along the way. And in 2020, to get through the pandemic, we had made a bigger investment and kind of restructured so we could survive the pandemic and brought in a new CEO. And so I've been around the company for a long time, and I knew a lot of the team members and the board and some of the leadership team pretty well. And then a couple years ago, I guess at the beginning of 2023, the CEO that we had brought in for a couple of years decided to retire. He was kind of at the end of his career, and we brought him in to help stabilize things during COVID. And so instead of going out and doing another global search, which if you've done is a pain in the butt, it takes a lot of time and money, the board basically said, well, Aaron, why don't, how about you come in and do it? Because I'd been around and the team liked me and I knew the business pretty well. And so it was like, all right, I got kind of drafted into it. I didn't really ask for it.
All right. I want to stop right there for a second because this isn't luck anymore. It's not Eric. And then you got this opportunity at Topgolf, and then it's Aaron, let's bring you in here. Cause I agree with you. A global search, you never know what you're going to get. So I know you're super humble, but what is it about you? What are the traits about you that these super successful people are willing to bet on you?
Oh man, I hate this. Put me on the spot. Let's talk about myself. I think what I always say is if you're smart enough to be able to solve problems and actually help, and you're also just kind and a nice person to work with. It sounds simple, but it's almost like having a superpower. Like, I don't know why it's hard for people, but I think for me, I've always in every business we work on, I jump in and roll up my sleeves and I try to learn as much as I can and really understand the business as well and fast as deeply as I can. So I can then actually help provide, real insight and problem solving. And then secondly is just be kind to people, right? Just because you're in a position of leadership or authority doesn't mean you need to be a jerk. I love leading and building teams because I love people and I love getting to know everybody on my team and what makes them tick and helping grow and develop people and teaching. I love teaching too. I think this is a side note, but I think all great leaders are also great teachers. And I think the other thing is some people, I don't know if this is something you're born with or you absorb, but I do think that born leaders kind of naturally fill a gap. When there's a lack of leadership, someone needs to kind of step in and help set some direction. And so I had already kind of been doing that where we had a CEO who was living in a different country and the team was kind of dispersed. And I was being in California and showing up as an advisor board member of the company. I was kind of providing some direction and coaching and already giving some leadership, just, not with authority, but with influence, which is an important thing. Leadership is about influence. It's not about control. Control is brittle. As soon as your title's taken away, you lose it, right? For me, I didn't even have a title. I just had people that were willing to follow me. And so it kind of just was a natural fit because the team liked me and they saw me as coming in and setting a direction. And they said, well, why don't we want you to just come do this full time? Like, let's do it. We like what you're saying and we like working with you. So yeah, I think it's, I'm a pretty quick study. I learn fast. I like to solve problems and I like to, help people be the best they can be. So
I got a lot of questions for you on these. I'm going to start with I think it's really important what you said right there, that leadership isn't about title. I had this guy on the show who's awesome. His name is Neil Jerd, and he said that that's the most fragile form of leadership, of control, by doing that compared to influence. And what I think is important that you said for our listeners is that leadership doesn't necessarily mean you have to be managing a 50-person, 100-person team. It's stepping up when things are needed and leading by example. And that sounds like that's exactly what you were doing right there, which that's why people like you and give you these opportunities. And my question, though, is, did you ever get in a situation where caring or being too nice burnt you? Because I've seen leaders who try to get who want to be liked. And that was a big problem for me early on too, is like wanting to be liked. And at the end of the day, you were respected less or weren't taken seriously because you're trying to be people's friends.
Yeah, Damon, that's a shot through the heart. That's probably my biggest challenge is, it's a couple things. One is wanting to be liked. I've probably, there's probably some therapy to be done there, but it's, who doesn't? So I certainly want to be liked and I want to be, and I also don't want to hurt people's feelings. If you care about people and you're soft, you want to give really tough love and feedback. Sometimes that's hard. And, or even like when it's time to let someone go, you're going to hurt them and that sucks. And the other thing is, not having been part of the company, I came in to a situation where some of the people that I had been peers and friends with, that I then coming into this job, all of a sudden I'm their boss. And that's a whole different weird situation too, right? That I've had to navigate still. My leadership team now are all people that I were friends and peers with 3 years ago. And that's, it's been interesting to navigate. The framework that I use, or one of the guiding principles that I follow is by this guy named Bill Robinson, who was president of my college. He wrote a book called Incarnate Leadership. But he talks about this idea of grace and truth, leading with grace and truth. And, too much, you have to have both, because too much grace is, like you're talking about, is permissive, and you don't ever help people to grow, right? You let them keep making the same mistakes. You don't give them feedback and tough love. And it's actually not really graceful at all if you just let them keep hurting themselves and don't let them improve. And on the other side, you have to have truth, like hard truth, but too much truth without grace is too harsh. And it doesn't, you have to recognize people's humanity, and you have to have empathy when you're delivering that feedback and you're delivering the hard truth, right? Because if it's just too harsh and not empathetic enough, then you're just throwing seeds onto concrete that aren't going to take root, and people don't hear you and they get defensive. And so I think part of my journey as a leader is always balancing, enough, grace and truth all the time. And when I'm in particular thinking about, am I being too nice? I need to push myself to be a little tougher. I remind myself, like, too much grace is really not gracious at all. If that makes sense.
Walk us through, you don't have to share the name of the individual, but walk us through an example of where that was going through your mind and you got out of your comfort zone and gave them the truth that they needed.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I've probably had one of those situations with everyone on my team at this point. And, oftentimes it is something like, hey, the way that you are showing up for your team is you're not elevating enough as a leader. You're taking things too personally. And I need you to zoom out and realize this is not about you. You've got to put the business first and, like, give feedback or direction to these people that, even though it may hurt, it's not about you. And you're getting stuck in the morass of things that is a distraction and is too much conflict. That sounds like, without getting into really specifics, it's like really vague. And so it's not super useful. But it's probably worth mentioning, like, the leadership team that I have now are almost all first-time leaders. So they're people that are really talented and have a lot of leadership potential, but have never been in a VP type of position before where they're leading a whole team or a function. And so we're learning a lot of lessons along the way about how to lead a company and how to be, when you're at that executive level, your team is your executive team and the company first. It's not about just your little silo or just your peers that you used to work with. And so there's been one consistent theme. It's like, if it's your team is having a conflict with, your sales team is having a conflict with your marketing team, the leaders of the sales and marketing, they can't just fight and say, well, my team's right and your team is wrong. Their job is to say, hey, we're the leaders. We got to put the company first and problem solve and resolve this for them, and not get into this kind of like tribal warfare. And I think we're doing a good job of that now, but that was a learning.
So I'm 100% on board with giving people leadership opportunities who've never led before, and I got some questions about that. But I'm gonna play the reverse role here. By having a leadership team that is just new leaders, how could that hold you back?
Yeah, well, I can certainly feel it, even if I can't articulate it. I do think that with experience as a leader, some of these things that we're dealing with just are kind of second nature. Like, I think once you've been through it a few times and you've spent time at the executive level, there's things that you realize they're just business. They're not personal. So whether that is wrestling with someone has an idea or a proposal or something, and we need to be able to like really, really tear that apart and decide if it's a good idea and do diligence and wrestle with the idea. And the person whose idea it is has to be able to take that and not take everything personally, like, oh, they hate my idea and so they hate me, right? I find that with more experienced leaders, it's a lot easier to look at these things objectively and wrestle with ideas on their merit, rather than taking offense as the person who came up with the idea. That's one example. That's
a good example, and I want to stick there for a second. What are a couple other challenges, but they could be very good challenges? So if I'm somebody who's promoting somebody into a leadership role for the first time, what should I know to make sure that I'm preparing them for success? Or what should I do to help prepare for them for success?
Yeah, I think one thing that this is like a very broad statement. It's not just in promotion, but sort of in general, onboarding employees, new processes, customers. I think that all of us could do better to spend more time thinking about the onboarding process and setting people up for success. So whether it's onboarding a new employee, whether it is putting someone into a new leadership position, whether it's bringing on a new customer, the bigger investment you make up front at the beginning of that journey, I think the more dividends it's going to pay. And so that could look like spending more time with that new leader, helping them understand the context, the greater context of the company and the goals and the team, and helping them, spending more and more time up front, helping them think like a leader and position themselves, versus just saying like, okay, you're in charge of this team now. Like, good luck. Let's go show up to the meeting next week. That could also look like, with a new employee, similar thing, helping them understand how their role fits into the company at large, how it fits into their team, why it matters to the goals of the company, how we serve our customers. And so I'm trying to spend more time on everything that we do across the board, thinking about how do I invest a little more time and effort up front to make this particular effort more successful in the long run.
No, that's a great way to think about it. What I hear you saying is if you put in the work up front, even though it might require patience and time and a little bit of frustration, if people are set up for success early on, if they know how their day-to-day work aligns with their team's goal and the organizational goal, that's going to help them in many instances, especially when it comes to decision making. So I think that's excellent. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about you and your leadership style. And you're a president of an organization, and you're 33 years old, so you don't have that experience that a lot of people do. But you and I have spoke about this before, and that's the importance of deep learning. So I'd love it if you could share your philosophy on that.
Yeah, I started getting thrown into, early on situations and opportunities that were above my head, or at least my experience level. And, Eric did a really good job and always has of giving me chances to grow and take on things that I'd never done before. As evidenced by even my current position and the last, few things I've done. But I would always say like, how do I do this? I've never done this before. And it's like, well, neither had the last person the first time they did it, but really what his philosophy was, deep thinking is a substitute for experience, right? Like experiencing something is actually the lazy way to learn it. Cause you're just sort of like, oh, well, I'm just going to let this happen to me. And then I'll know. It's like, well, okay. You could sit back and you can actually think through like, oh, what would happen in this situation? And how do I think through this scenario? And so, or you can observe, there's sort of three levels. There's like experiencing, there's watching, and there's thinking. So I can experience it for myself. I could watch someone else and learn from someone else who's experienced it, which a lot of times is like all these books on my shelf. And then the furthest level is like, in theory, I could actually use this, amazing brain that God gave me and say, I should be able to reason through a scenario and think about, if I do this, what might the outcomes be and how will that work? And so he taught me like, don't ever think that you can't do something well just because you've never done it before. And then, I also learned from, Charlie Munger, who was Warren Buffett's business partner, rest in peace. He always used to say, only a fool learns from his own mistakes rather than from the mistakes of others. Right. And so that's the reason that I learn and I read so much. Is like, man, there's been 8 billion, 100 billion people came before me that made all these same mistakes. Why don't I just learn from them instead of making them for myself? And so I spend a lot of time, especially when it comes to leadership. There's luckily, most of these books are written by people who were, or about people, biographies and things, because people did great things. And so they had a lot of leadership and made mistakes. And I've spent a lot of time learning from people that died a long time ago, and trying to apply those to myself. Like,
what are 3 great leadership or biographies or whatever you want to call them, books would you recommend for somebody early in their leadership career?
I really love George Washington. Big Washington fan. In fact, if you're not a big reader, just go watch Hamilton, the musical, instead. The blog post that I've never written that I want to is like, what are 10 leadership lessons from Hamilton? But I think Washington is such a great example of like continually being called into leadership, being drafted into, situations that he didn't necessarily even ask for, but he had prepared for nonetheless because of just who he was as a person. And then once it was done, like, it's funny, all he wanted to do was go home and like go retire to his ranch. But then he kept having to like get called back, like, oh, well, now you're going to go lead the war. It's like, okay, now I just want to go home. Great. Okay, well, sorry, now you have to be president of the country and build a country. It's like, oh my gosh, okay, when do I get to go home? So I love Washington because of all the lessons from him. Oh yeah, that's a good one. I really like Todd Bolsinger. He's a speaker and writer now today, not dead yet. He writes about a book called Canoeing the Mountain. It's about adaptive leadership, which is that's kind of where I got this idea of leadership versus control, and how, power is like a technical solution that's brittle or fragile, like your friend said. And, adaptive leadership is much more fluid and flexible. And so I think Canoeing the Mountain is a good one. The other one, my favorite leadership book, it's only 100 pages. It's by Bill Robinson. It's called Incarnate Leadership. And it is like 5 leadership lessons from the life of Jesus. And you don't have to be, a Jesus fan to find it. I give it to everybody just because I think it's a great leadership book. It talks about leading from the middle, talks about truth and grace. It talks about shining the light on others, not on yourself, reflecting the light on others. And, it's just a really good, straightforward leadership book.
I'm going to add all 3 of those to the show notes for sure. With somebody who's got so much going on, and I think this is an important question, how do you find time to continue learning and specifically reading?
It's a good question. I don't always. I'll tell you the 2 times. Airplanes, when you fly a lot, I often find myself tempted to watch, Top Gun Maverick for the 16th time. But I also tell myself, like, this is your time, this is your time. You get to invest in yourself. And then the other thing is I like to have quiet time. I'm not a morning person. I tend to be kind of a night owl, and usually my wife goes to bed at like 9:30, 10 o'clock. And so I have a couple hours in the evening where I sit here and either work on something or do some writing, or I get to read for a couple hours. And, I love it. I'm a big cocktail person. So my favorite, time in the evening is make a drink, and I have a whole home bar that I built. And so I go like make something up, I make a drink, and then I get to go retire to my study for the evening and get some work done.
I'm with you on that. I quit drinking a while ago, but one of my favorite things to do is get a book and like a notepad and go to like a bar in San Francisco and just kind of sit there by myself, and reflect and
I love that.
Read and do it. I think it's so important. But one thing about you that I wanted to really bring up, because again, most of our listeners are high performers, hard workers. But one thing about you that through my research is growing up, you've always been very disciplined. So can you share with us a little bit about what that's looked like throughout your trajectory?
Yeah. What's really funny is people say that, and I would, if I think about it, I would never describe myself as a disciplined person. I actually think naturally I'm a really lazy person, which is probably why the discipline is necessary. But some of it was forced. So I grew up swimming, and I swam in, through high school and college, and that requires, it's a lot of time. I mean, it's like 5 a.m, 3 p.m. You're swimming 4 or 5 hours a day while also doing college and doing jobs and trying to have a girlfriend and all these things. And so it kind of is just necessary. I've always been really good at powering through and absolutely getting done whatever was necessary to accomplish my goal. Things that are more like a nice to have that might serve me in some way, but aren't necessarily like must do's for the team that I'm serving or for the people I'm trying to not let down. I'm not as good at those. But if it's something about like, you have to do this or you're going to let your team down, or you have to get this done because your wife is counting on you, I will get it done. I don't care if I have to stay up for 48 hours or if I have to run 100 miles, So I think part of it's like, how are you motivated? I'm highly motivated to serve people I care about and to not let them down. And I think, discipline is an amazing thing. If you listen to like Jocko, ever listen to Jocko podcasts? He talks about, he's amazing, right? It's like, and Jocko Willink, it's, discipline is, when he says discipline equals freedom, it's so true, because if you don't train yourself to just automatically do these things and not even give yourself a choice, every time, your alarm goes off in the morning and you're subjecting yourself back to your own will. Do you have the willpower to get up every single day over and over again? do you have the willpower to say no to that piece of pizza or to the beer? Like, you're going to lose that battle at least half the time. I mean, it's a toss up every day, right? But if you say, I'm not the kind of person that drinks, like I don't drink, or I'm not the kind of person that sleeps in the morning, it's just an identity thing, and you don't even give yourself a choice. That itself is like freedom, because you free yourself up from having to use your willpower to like make that choice, which is hard.
So what you're saying is, I think James Clear talks about it in Atomic Habit, where he says, you like, I'm a healthy person.
Yeah, that's where I got that from, was from James.
Yeah, James Clear, Atomic Habits. Yeah. And I actually do that sometimes too, where so I'm a healthy person. So then those Mentos, those fruit Mentos, are out of the question.
Yeah, identity is such a powerful concept, right? Yeah. You make a part of your identity. Just say something like, I am not a person who eats junk food. What's your identity? See, because here's why I bring this up, Aaron. Because when I was because I like you, I was a baseball player, right, through college. And when my baseball career ended, I lost my identity, because I thought that's all I was a baseball player. And I've helped people ever since with that, especially athletes, because now my identity is not that. But I want to know what your identity is. It's funny. I haven't really thought about it explicitly before, but I was a swimmer. I was a student, and you go through this identity crisis when you come out of that. When I think about, okay, who I am and what drives me, like I'm a leader. Doesn't matter if it's at Singularity or Liquor Lab or Topgolf, or just in life with my family and friends, I'm a leader. And if, we always say, like I learned this from Eric too, we've said for 10 years, when in doubt, lead. If there's a situation that's in need of leadership, step up. And so I know that I am the person who will always do that. And I also know that, I don't let my team down. Part of my identity is I don't let people down. So whether that's my family or my friends or my team, that can take lots of different forms. But I know that now I'm not always going to be successful, because sometimes you fail. And I do know that I'm going to do whatever I can to make that true.
That's awesome. Question for you. I actually did I haven't released it yet, but a solo episode on becoming the type of leader that your team doesn't want to let down. So let's look at it from this perspective. Like, so you work you really think the world of Eric, right? And, you also have a team members. How do you become a leader where their mindset is, and not a manipulative way, but how do you become the type of leader where they think to themselves, I really don't want to let Aaron down, and here's why?
I mean, I think it kind of starts with caring, right? Like, I look at Ted Lasso. Ted Lasso is my favorite show. And
great show, except for I didn't love the last season, but I loved Ted Lasso beforehand.
I loved it all the way through. And I think, he cares so much about those people, about those guys. And they feel it and they believe it. And because of that, they really don't want to let him down. And so I try to make sure with my team, like, they know I really care. I care about each of them. That doesn't mean they're always going to work here or they're always going to have the same job or any of those things, but it does mean that they matter to me as a human. And that's not going to change regardless of what they do or where they work.
What's an example of how you're able to show them that you care?
I mean, the way I show it is you get to know people and you care about what they care about. Like, I know every person in my company. I know where they went to college and what they studied. Because that's 20 something people. Every person, it tells me, what they wanted to do with their life and what they were interested in. And at some point in their life, what their dreams and ambitions were. And then also tells me something about their journey and where they are now, where they came from. I know birthdays and kids' names and where they live, and like, you just get to know people and it's not just like a party trick. It's like, it has to be genuine. You have to actually care about people. But
you have to be authentic. You have to be genuine.
Yeah. But it shows. I mean, when you really care and it's authentic, I think people can tell. And I think they want to show up for you.
They want to show up for you. And it kind of loops back to what you brought up earlier about giving people the opportunity to bring their full self to the office. I think if, and you mentioned this as well, modeling the behavior, if you're modeling the behavior of being genuine, authentic, and not trying to be somebody else, that your people will do the same. One little tip for the listeners that I always try to do, no matter how busy I am, when I jump on a Zoom call or on a meeting with somebody, and as much as I really want to just get into it, because trust me, I do, I'll stop and ask, how are your kids, or what's going on, or is there anything I could help you with, and then actually really listen to them, instead of just asking the question and moving on. So, I think that's awesome, and I could tell that you care. I think about this myself sometimes, a lot of times actually. What is one leadership decision or move you've made in the last 6 months, Aaron, where you say, oh man, I wish I would have done that differently?
These ones are easier for me. Oh man, I've got a handful.
Give it to us. These are good learning lessons.
Yeah. Let me think about this for a second. I had a meeting last year. It's probably a year ago now, that had my leadership team together. We did an offsite, day facilitated quarterly meeting thing. And, I really screwed up because I had one person on my team had been, doing certain things that were making other people on the team, like making decisions and making comments and working in such a way that like made other people on the team feel like, hey, this guy doesn't really care about what we're doing. He's kind of trying to do his own thing, isn't really interested, and is not engaged with the rest of the team, like really feeling sort of like he's isolating. And there was this feeling building kind of on the leadership team. And the right thing to do would have been to go directly to him and talk about this and say, hey, your team is feeling this way, and I want you to kind of do these things differently or do something differently. And instead, what I did was I brought it up in a full team meeting where all of us are together. And I had it come from me, but basically put it on the spot where it was like, all of a sudden he felt like, oh my gosh, everyone is against me. I'm being put on the spot and I'm being kind of caught off guard in front of this whole group. And it was really uncomfortable and bad. And it was a terrible leadership move on my part. And as soon as I brought it up and got into it, I immediately knew I had made a mistake and tried to recover from it. But it was kind of a different version of people say criticize in private, praise in public. Really, really don't criticize and put someone on the spot in front of everybody else and then have other people pile on top of it. That's like absolute worst thing you can do. So that was a big mistake I learned from. And I think the other thing is, another one that was a big lesson is when you have conflict, don't let it fester. Like you gotta attack stuff and just get it done and move out of the way. If you let things boil under the surface and don't get around to it and keep telling yeah, we'll talk about this at some point or we'll deal with it, and it just festers, it just gets worse and worse and harder to deal with. And so it's been a big lesson for me is pulling my head out and just solving problems head on when they come up rather than letting things, kick the can down the road. That's great that
it's hard to do. For me, I found that it's not that difficult having the conversation once it's getting started. Once it's already started, but it's just approaching and having that conversation. Because if you sit back and you just expect it to take care of itself, another guy I had on the show who was awesome, and you should read his book, Gary Ridge, Any Dumbass Can Do It. Actually, I was going to give it to you. I told you about that.
You're going to give me a copy of it.
I was going to give you a copy of it. I still will. He talks about how leaders, Aaron, protect their comfort zone. And when they do that, what they need to realize is that they're hurting the rest of the team. They're letting those problems fester, or they're letting that employee get away with the kind of behavior that they shouldn't. And that great leaders understand it's not about them. It's getting out of their comfort zone and having those difficult conversations. Have you ever had, since you're a nice guy, have you ever had a situation where you've kept employees too long?
I would rather fall on the side of more grace than more truth if I had to. And so if you think about being too harsh on somebody and pulling the trigger quick versus believing in people and believing in redemption and growth, I'm not ashamed of being somebody that believes in redemption and trying hard at that. But at the same time, to be a great leader, you've got to be able to pull the trigger and realize when situations are only hurting everybody involved by letting them continue. I've done that a number of times in the last 2 years, and I've gotten better at it. And I just try to remind myself that, if a situation is not a good fit, all you're doing is holding somebody back from the next thing, which is probably a better fit.
Have you ever had, I totally agree with you, by the way, because they're probably miserable at their role too, right? They're miserable. But have you ever had... And
that's how you frame it. I mean, I came into it like, hey, I'm not happy. You're not happy. Clearly this isn't working out. So let's call it what it is and let me help you find a better situation.
That is a learning lesson, for all the listeners out there, that's a learning lesson. And that's the kind of mindset you got to go through. Because if you're not happy with them and they're struggling, I can't imagine, especially good people, wanting to come into work every day and failing. So having that conversation, you're going to take that weight off their back. Here's another common situation, and I know we got to wrap up here in a couple of minutes, but I'm really enjoying this. Another common situation is guys like me and you, we really care and we put a lot of trust into people. I'm sure you've experienced putting all kinds of trust into somebody, really investing in them, and then having them burn you. First of all, has that happened to you? And then second of all, if it has, what advice do you have for leaders out there to not become cynical, but to be able to continue to be able to trust people moving forward, even after a situation like that?
The one that I can think of is somebody who worked for me at one point that was really nice and collaborative to my face and then in the team setting, but was, really terrible to me behind my back. And unfortunately was undermining and saying some mean things. And that's always really disappointing and hurtful to find out. But I do think it also comes with the territory, when you're in the leadership seat. Like even, who of us hasn't at some point complained about the boss or complained about the CEO? It's like, that's life. It's natural. But when it's somebody that you really trust and put a lot of faith in and you thought you had a great relationship and then you hear those things, it can be pretty hurtful. So, I don't know, I did my best to just, help them move on and then not dwell on it and say, it's, they weren't happy. People need to take things out in different ways, and that's okay.
But did it scar you as a leader at all? It
did make you a little more cynical. I mean, it definitely, it pulls the scales off your eyes a little bit in terms of naivete and thinking, oh, everything is all hunky dory and great. And it did put a little bit of an edge on me in terms of, okay, people might be saying things to my face, and they always tell you what you want to hear as a leader, right? Because people want to keep their job and they can say anything they want behind closed doors, and but that's never going to change. That's okay.
Just got to get used to it.
You just got to get used to it and try to live and lead in such a way that hopefully people won't say mean things about you.
Yeah. And listeners, you've probably heard me talk about, I call it the trust tax, where, I'm still going to trust people. Regardless if you get beat up and let down, I think you're better off going that route than getting cynical. Okay. We're going to wrap up here really quick, but, all right. Me and you have we have the same poster on the wall. One of my idols, Churchill, Winston Churchill. What's one thing that you love about Churchill or his leadership style?
Oh my gosh. Let's talk about relentless, man. He was relentless. The thing that I love about Churchill is that it's kind of like, not to bump Eric's ego too much, but like, it's kind of like the technology thing with Topgolf. Churchill knew the most important thing that he could do to win the war was get the US involved. Almost like nothing else mattered. It was like, what is the one thing? The one thing is get FDR's butt over here and get America to get involved in the war. If that's all he did, then that's all that mattered. And so that type of like singular vision and conviction is incredible, right? And it's like all this other crap that he did. I mean, he was an incredible orator and motivator and speaker. His way with words is amazing, right? But the thing that won the war was his conviction of what they needed to do and getting it done. And I love that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you on that. Now, we've talked a lot about learning, mentorship from Eric and other people you learn from. I mean, you're a young guy, but do you feel any pull to you having to give back yourself? I mean, how are you going to help when it comes to, or do you want to help others? I'm sure you do. That's a stupid way to put it. Do you feel that pull moving forward to mentor and help others, either through coaching them or writing a book, or how are you going to get your lessons out there of already even just bottling up this last 10 years?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I do love to help. One of my great passions and ways that I give back is spending time with my university, with Whitworth. So I've been on the board of the business school for about 8 years. I chair the board there now. And I actually just joined the board of trustees of the university also this year. And so that's been really, really an honor. I assumed that, I probably would join maybe someday, but it might be 10 or 20 years from now. And so, I love giving back, going and talking to students and mentoring kids, whether it's the investment club or the business school. And I love to teach. If I didn't travel so much, I would love to teach part-time at a school down the road here. But for now, I think, talking to kids and doing podcasts. I don't know about the book thing. I think we'll see if that comes down the road at some point. But I think I've got a little bit more to learn first.
Well, Aaron, you've been awesome. We've talked about everything from deep learning. We talked about curiosity, the importance of being the person who jumps in and not wanting to let your team down, and really. I think one of the things about you as a leader is that you authentically and truly care about your people, which is so important. What is one more thing that you would like to leave our listeners with?
I think the world is lacking a little bit of earnestness. And the thing that I love about Ted Lasso is that he created a culture where it was cool to care. And nobody was like too cool to get involved. And I think if I could leave a message, it's like, don't be too cool to care, And if you're building a culture, it's like, make it cool to care. And in your personal life, it's like, it's okay. It's good. It's good to be earnest and to be genuine and be excited about things and to care about people. And so that's what I'd like to see more of in the world.
Me too. Where can our listeners connect with you at?
So you can find us if you want to come to a Singularity program, or learn more about what that actually is. You can come to su.org. If you want to follow me, I have an Instagram. It's at Aaron.Vaccaro, and we post clips of, podcasts and things. I'm learning to be more active on that. And, you can find me on LinkedIn if you search Aaron Vaccaro. There's only two of us. It's me and,
a writer, right?
And Aaron, who's a Hollywood scriptwriter. Yeah, we haven't met yet, but I'm sure we will someday.
Yeah, well, Aaron, you've been awesome. Thank you for being so vulnerable and open and humble. And listeners, here's what I want you to do. If you're a leader, I want you to think about what is one thing you can do this week to show your team members that you care. And if you're not leading a team, that's totally fine. What is one thing you can do to step up and take charge of it? Jump in where maybe you're not asked to help, but you want to jump in and you want to be a great team player and lead by example. Do those two things for me. And if you haven't already, please like and review the Learn It All podcast on whatever platform you're on, because that really helps us. And until next time, everybody, stay curious, keep learning, and have a great day. Thank you. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you.
I often say if you have a bunch of issues and challenges or stresses in your life, write them down and then look at all of them and ask yourself, could I let this go? Could I let this go? And if the answer is yes, see if you can.